Yo, what's up, guys? Topics here, and I wanted to make a video on my early impressions for Protection Warrior in World of Warcraft Midnight. Um, so I've covered a few things on Midnight, but really not a whole lot. It's been, a few weeks since the announcement. We've had multiple posts of news and class changes and various other just complete game changing design changes and the theory of how they're approaching things now. Obviously, you guys have heard of all that, the stripping of the UI and so forth. Um, but obviously, you know that I've been mainly covering Protection Warrior content, so I figured that this would be a great video to kind of cover um, what we should be expecting and some of my early impressions of Protection Warrior in Midnight. So I think the first thing we're gonna do is take a look at talents. And once I take a look at talents and kind of how that impacts us, I'll tell you my top four pros and cons. All right, so I just have the midnight talent calculator open. I'm not going to build this whole thing out. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of builds early on. But I just want to go over some of the important things that are happening to Protection Warrior. So, um, let's start in the class tree. So Rend was moved to the class tree, and I'm not going to go over every change here. I'm just going to go over some of the bigger ones. Rend was moved to the class tree, which you'll definitely still take this. There's another talent that causes Thunderclap to apply Rend. It's the same as it is right now on live, so you'll just want to take Rend so that your Thunderclap can apply it. It's just moved to the class tree. That's all. Um, Thunderous Roar is gone. If you guys have noticed, that was down here. Now anger management is a capstone. But yeah, Thunderous Roar is gone. Uh, you know, that was an offensive CD that we were using right now. Almost every warrior was playing that. But instead, anger management is here. Um, and then another thing that you might notice is like there's some different talents change here with Spear. They've completely reworked Spear, which we'll go over in a second. But that's another big change here. They've also reworked how a lot of your shouts work. Intimidating Shout and Piercing Howl. And then if you read this tooltip, Battlefield Commander, this is a new talent. It basically buffs all your shouts in some way. So those are some of the bigger changes on the class side. As for the spec side, a change that you might notice is Disrupting Shout. Is just one talent. Before it was two talents. You had to basically talent a Disrupting Shout, and then you had to spend another talent to turn it into an AoE kick. Now it's just one talent for the AoE kick and the AoE taunt. So they're basically freeing up a talent point there, which is nice. All right, we're back. Had to like refresh and reload the page. But yeah, we were talking about the spec side changes. About how like a talent has been freed up there. Ooh, one thing I forgot on the class side, unstoppable force, immovable object removed. It was like a middle capstone here. It is now gone. Another thing is Last Stand has been reworked and has been moved to the class tree. It used to be on spec tree for Prot only. Now it's been moved to the class tree, and any spec can get it. And it's basically just like a mini cheat death. When your health is brought below 20%, you basically heal for 30% and gain that amount of health for 15 seconds. It can only occur once every 4 minutes. So you basically have like a little mini cheat death heal every 4 minutes instead of having to press this. This does mean you get less uses of it because right now it was only a 3-minute cooldown, and now it's basically a 4-minute cooldown and a passive. So that's been changed, and that'll free up a button. But I believe that's the majority of the changes. There was way more changes on the class side over here than there were on the spec side. Some things have been moved around. We can look at the new hero talents and the apex talents quick though. So the hero talents for Mountain Thane. This is the new row that you're going to be able to spend your new talent points going from the next 10 levels in Midnight. Avatar increases damage of Thunderclap by 50% and reduces its cooldown by 50%. So that's cool. So you're gonna be thunderclapping and thunder blasting way more, and it's gonna do more damage. So who doesn't like that as a Mountain Thane Prot Warrior? Lightning strike damage increased by 10%, and critical strike damage increased by 10%. And then the last one here, how do you say this? Capacitance? Yeah. During Avatar, Thunder Blast extends Avatar's duration by 2 seconds. So this is crazy because right now, uh, Thunder Blast is a proc, right? But during Avatar, that's all that you have is Thunder Blast. It turns your Thunderclap into Thunder Blast for like the duration of Avatar. So, and you're also getting 50% reduced CD, which means instead of a 4-second cooldown, it's going to be a 2-second cooldown. But it's also extending the duration of Avatar by 2 seconds. So, in my opinion, what this means is you could remain an Avatar a very, very long time. Like extremely long time. Because if you're getting Thunder Blast and if you're being able to press Thunder Blast like every 2 seconds and it also increases Avatar duration by 2 seconds, then essentially you could just permanently extend Avatar. Obviously, there's other GCDs that you have to press, which is why Avatar will probably eventually fall off. But when you press Avatar and you start Thunder Blasting the crap out of everything and extending the duration, you're gonna be an Avatar a long, long time. So these hero talents are actually massive for Warriors damage. So let's look at these Apex talents. Phalanx. Shield Slam critical strikes unleash a wave of force, dealing 90% of attack power physical damage to all enemies in front of you, and reducing the damage they deal to you by 5% for 5 seconds. So when you critical strike with Shield Slam, it's basically like an AoE wave in front of you, similar to like how Revenge is a wave in front of you, and it's gonna give you a 5% DR from everyone hit. And then the next one is damage dealt by Thunderclap and Phalanx, wave of force increased by 10%. And then the capstone for the Apex talent is, and this is a 2-choice node by the way, so this would go like to 10 and then 20%. And then the capstone is while Shield Block is active, Shield Slam deals 10% additional damage and 20% increased chance to critically strike. So, you always have Shield Block up, so this is basically just permanent, right? Like this is basically just saying you have a 10% additional damage and 20% crit chance always. Now, Warrior typically plays a lot of crit anyway, so if this is giving you an extra 20% crit on Shield Slam, and then you already play like 20 to 30% crit, that you're basically being like critting like 50% of your Shield Slams, which means you're probably going to be putting out this wave of force 50% of the time, which means, you know, it's going to average out to about a 2.5% DR, which is nice, a little bit more baseline tankiness as long as you're pressing your Shield Slam. This also means that you're going to want to press Shield Slam every time it's up, even in AoE. Like basically, even if you have a Thunder Blast or Thunderclap available, you're probably going to want to press Shield Slam when it's up, just so that you can get this wave of force and DR. You know exactly, which is why you're not going to be able to extend Avatar forever, because you will be using GCDs on Shield Slam, but you'll be able to extend it a lot. So definitely changing the way our gameplay is a little bit more to think about rotationally. We'll actually have to see how the sims work out, like how much it's worth pressing Shield Slam in AoE if you have Thunder Blast. I'm curious what will take priority, because there's increased damage to Thunder Blast a lot here, but you also have this wave of force that will come out if you use Shield Slam, and you'll get a DR. And you have a lot of extra crit on Shield Slam too. So really interested to see like kind of what the priorities look like once sims start getting going as alpha progresses and we get closer to midnight release. But very, very interesting. All right, so we've kind of looked at what those talents look like. Okay, button bloat. So this has been a huge topic for many classes. A lot of classes have got completely gutted. You know, Shaman's been gutted, Mage has been pretty gutted. I know that like Brewmaster Monk basically only has one defensive left, which is Fort Brew. DK lost a few defensives and buttons. Ironically, Prot Warrior probably is not losing any buttons, I'll be honest with you. And I'll kind of show you why. So obviously I'm not on alpha right now. I'm on live. But let me just this isn't the spear that we're gonna have obviously, but I'm just doing this for the sake of demonstration purposes. So we're going to be losing Thunderous Roar. So you'll probably have Spear on your hotkey bar like this instead of Thunderous Roar and M+. So you're not really losing a button there because you'll be playing Spear instead because of, we're going to talk about in a second how Spear's been reworked. And then Last Stand will be removed, so, that just won't be a button down here. So you'll still have your Shield Wall and all these defensives down there. You still have your Battle Scarred Veteran. You just won't have Last Stand. However, you might be playing Piercing Hail in some situations. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So I don't think the amount of buttons we have is going to change actually at all in Prot Warrior. It's about the same, which is kind of interesting because it's probably going to be one of the highest keybind warriors left in the game. A lot of the other warriors got stripped, but we didn't really get stripped that much. We kind of just got like a little bit of a rework and some changes. So that's basically how that looks in terms of like visually what it'll look like in Midnight. You might have Piercing Howl on your bar instead of Last Stand, and Champion Spear will replace Thunderous Roar in a lot of builds. Now, let's talk about the cons and the pros, okay? I did 4 of each, and I'm sure there's more than this, but these are the main ones. Put on the screen for you here. Let's start with the cons. Losing Thunderous Roar, okay? This is a little bit of a con because this was an offensive CD, and it's a good threat for gatherings. Like, typically you would gather a whole pack, and then you'd Thunderous Roar, and it would put that dot on everything, and that was a great way to kind of establish threat. Speaking of a pull, we're losing that. We're also losing CDR and shield Wall. So Anger Management, it still gives CDR on Avatar, but it's no longer giving CDR and Shield Wall. So Shield Wall, 2-minute recharge, 2 charges. There's going to be big gaps. Like if you have 2 Tank Busters close together, or you're playing a really dangerous pack, you need to use both of them. There's going to be like a minute and a half gap after that sometimes where you're not going to have Wall. And Wall is pretty much our only big defensive now. Other than Spell Reflect, which you can use on Magic DR, but Shield Wall is basically the only defensive, and we're going to be having some gaps there. So might be some concerns there if there's like a lot of Tank Busters. But that's one of them. The next con is losing bleed damage and self-sustain with deep wounds only applying with execute. So yeah, number one, deep wounds only applies with execute, so we're not going to have deep wounds bleed damage going out other than in execute phases, in Mythic Plus at least. And then we also are losing Unstoppable Force and Immovable Object. So these were the ones that, one of them gave you Shield Wall when you activated Avatar and vice versa, and then the other one basically increased the damage of Thunder Blast. Now I don't think that's probably the least big deal, because as you saw, I'm just going to jump right into the pros here, is that they're adding a lot more baseline damage in the core rotation, including Thunderclap. So Thunderclap's damage, one of the hero talents is like buffing it by 50%, and then there's another talent there that also buffs it, so they're compensating for losing Unstoppable Force by just buffing our baseline damage. And you also saw that they're buffing Shield Slam by basically giving it an AoE wave that can proc when we crit, and that also gets its damage buffed by 10% and 20% crit. So Shield Slam and Thunderclap and Thunder Blast are doing way more damage. I mean way more. Like we're talking about like 70 to 80% probably more than they do right now, which is great because it'll help with gathering, it'll help with threat. And so I don't really think that con of losing Unstoppable Force is that bad when they're compensating by giving us more baseline damage in our rotation. So that's the first pro. Second pro is mobility and gathering help with Spear. So Spear right now is basically just a tether that roots enemies and does a little bit of damage. It's still going to do some damage and root enemies, but you're going to be able to leap to it if you press the button again after you activate it. So you're going to press Spear and place it somewhere, and then if you press it again, you're going to leap to that location. So this is basically just like a second leap when gathering, right? You could like charge and taunt, you could throw your axe, you could leap to an enemy and do a GCD, you could also throw your spear down and then press it again to leap to that. So warriors are going to have like unbelievable mobility when gathering specifically, because you'll probably use this spear on gather, I'm assuming. You could also use it to prevent mobs from fleeing, but I think you'll probably just use it on big gathers to help give you another leap. So that's a pro. Another pro is the extra utility and buffs we're getting that I kind of demonstrated a little bit in the talent trees. So um, Piercing Howl and Intimidating Shout are now in a choice node. Where Intimidating Shout, they changed where only the primary target basically is feared. The rest of them just like flee from you. So I think they just like run away from you, but they don't like have that like disorient fear where they're kind of going crazy. So I think the reason they did this is they didn't want to make it seem too risky where you fear all of the enemies that it hits, but instead you only fear the main one and the rest are kind of just like briefly interrupted. So their intention here is for this to be used as an AoE stop, in my opinion, which is what this rework screams to me. And then the choice node with Piercing Howl, which is a snare, an AoE snare, it's also a movement speed buff. So my hunch is that Prot Warrior already has a lot of stops. I think you might actually be taking Piercing Howl here just for the AoE snare to slow enemies and for the movement speed. It's basically a 30% movement speed. So you're basically getting Stampeding Roar on Prot Warrior now. So this will be huge for raid situations when your whole group needs, or your whole raid needs movement speed. But it'll also be nice in M plus in some areas. You know, think about Stampeding Roar and Wind Fury Totem in M plus can be pretty useful. So I think you might be taking Piercing Howl just for movement speed. So that's a pro. And then the buffs to Rallying Cry and Battle Shout. There's a node that basically gives you extra 3% attack power. So not the group. The group's still gonna have the 5%, but you're gonna have 8% attack power from Battle Shout now. And you're gonna have, and the whole group is gonna have an extra 2% from Rallying Cry. So Rallying Cry is gonna be a 12% HP increase and an instant heal, and not a 10%. So just a little 2% buff there, a little bit stronger. I honestly think they could buff Rallying Cry to 20 or 30%, but that's just my opinion. And last but not least, pro is that there are some freed up talent points. You know, they made Disrupting Shout baseline, and so now you only have to spend a talent. You only have to basically spend one talent point on it to get the AoE kick. Where you used to have to spend 2 to get the talent and then turn it into an AoE kick, you now only have to spend 1 on it. And then they obviously removed a bunch of other talents, which in theory frees up some other talent points that you're going to be able to place elsewhere. So might be able to get access to a few other things. You know, maybe it's passives, maybe it's actual utility. That's to be determined on what the builds are going to be. But it's obviously always good when we have freed up talent points, which is interesting because we didn't really get button bloat removed, but instead we're getting some talent points freed up. So does that mean we're actually going to have more buttons? There's a chance that, you know, we actually have more buttons than the War Within, which is interesting because we might be one of the only classes that that's the case for. So anyways, that's the video, you guys. We went over what the talents are looking like for Midnight, kind of what that looks like for us visually on the hotbar and keybinds, and then also what the pros and cons were. So this is my little mini breakdown of Prot Warrior in Midnight. I'm definitely not dooming. I'm not concerned about any of this. I know some people have been dooming, saying like, oh, you know, we're losing CDR and shield wall, we're losing this and this and that, but they've, in my opinion, compensated for all of that, like more than enough. The only reason that the shield wall CDR would be an issue is if there's constant tank busters in all these dungeons. But you know, as we've seen, Blizzard has already moved away from that constant tank busters. They want tank damage to be more of a smooth intake. So for that reason, I'm not really concerned about any of this. I think if we're good is going to be completely dependent on tuning and dungeon design. But I'm not worried about like our class or spec design at all. I think these were actually like pretty good changes, and I'm excited about how the class is going to feel to play, because I do think it'll feel quite different. And I know I didn't cover Colossus in this video, but I think Mountain Thane is far superior still from reading the notes. You know, we'll see if that changes. If it does, I'll probably make a video, but as of right now, Mountain Thane is still king for Prot Warrior. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace. Shout out to all the Patreon members. It's because of your support that I'm able to continue making Protection Warrior and World of Warcraft content. Thank you.